record it on? Okay, so the recording's in progress. So if we can have the next slide, please, Chloe. Okay, so what's this webinar for? Sharing information really about the review of the dog control policy and the dog control bylaw. We are seeking feedback and ideas from the community. We want to answer questions and concerns that you have. It's important to realize that this is the very beginning of the review. We're not doing this the way that council very often has done, in do a piece of work, then put it out for community consultation. We want to have your ideas at the very beginning. So no decisions have yet been taken in this review, apart from the one to actually do the review at all. So we want to hear the community's ideas first. We're not asking for submissions at this stage. This is an informal community engagement process or stage, asking for ideas and feedback. We'll come to the formal public consultation where we ask for submissions on proposals, probably earlier in the new year. And the new year is quite some way off yet. So we've got no proposals yet because it's the start. So it's your chance for the community to give us a steer on the issues that you see as important. I did wonder earlier whether we're almost like inviting the tail to wag the dog, but maybe that's the way we usually work, and we're actually asking the dog to wag the tail. So the feedback that you've given us so far, and we've had a lot of feedback, which is great, and thank you for that. It's not your submission on this policy and the bylaw. It won't prevent you from making your views known again during the public consultation or even in this engagement process. If you want to make a submission later, you will have to have another go, and you will have formal proposals that you can comment on. So we still want your ideas, we still want your feedback, so that we can take that and feed it all into the review. Okay, I'm now going to hand over to Wayne to take us on from here. Thank you, Wayne.
Thanks for that, Graham. So next slide. Firstly, just on behalf of the team, I'd just like to thank everybody for taking your time. I know it's important to listen to our webinar, and we appreciate that time, and we appreciate you listening and providing feedback as well. Look, I just wanted to get the messaging correct here, and so I'd really firstly just like to apologise to everybody, as our initial messaging on the council website was not correct, where it said we were considering a dog ban at Lake Tekutu, Cambridge, and the Te Awamutu War Memorial Park. We got that wrong, and we have corrected the website and issued a media release, an update to that effect. I want to be clear that neither our elected members of council or council staff are promoting a dog ban as part of this dog policy and bylaw review process in these parks. These areas are special areas for all people to enjoy, including for walking and exercising your dogs. We're open to your feedback and to other members of the public, whether this continues to be dog off-lead areas or dog on-lead areas only, or a combination of both. And it's based on plans that we've been done for these parks areas, which also provides for other things and other activities such as picnic areas. And our parks team, Brad, will comment on that later in the presentation. We also are interested in whether we should continue to allow dogs in the Kakapungamanga, as we've been requested to consider this as part of the review process. Yeah, and our team will also talk about some other new potential dog off-lead areas as well. So once again, we're very sorry our initial messaging was inaccurate, which has resulted in legitimate concerns being raised. That wasn't the intention for that to occur. Importantly, just want to confirm that the Council's not going to rush this dog policy bylaw review process. It's important we hear from all stakeholders, as Graham was saying, as part of this early engagement process, and that helps shape any changes to the existing dog policy and review process. As Graham's saying, no decisions have been made other than to embark upon receiving early feedback and outlining the review process, and Graham's just highlighted that. So that's sort of the upfront messaging from me. Thanks again for coming along to the webinar, and I'll pass on now to Carl Tutty, our Manager of Compliance, to go through some of the changes in more detail.
Thanks, Wayne. Good evening, everyone. So it's useful probably just to set the scene a little bit and just give a bit of background in terms of the dog control policy, where it's at, where it's come from, and where to from here. So if you haven't seen the entire dog control policy and bylaw, obviously it's on our website. So I'd strongly suggest you have a look at that, and particularly before making any formal submissions, mainly just to flag that you know, there's more to it than just public places and on-lead, off-lead. There's a whole policy and bylaw on a range of other issues, and we just want to make sure that we capture feedback on the whole policy and not just certain parts of it. So why does council have a policy? Well, the short answer is because we have to. The government has put in place through the Dog Control Act a requirement that every council in the country has a dog control policy. So Waipawa District Council has had a policy and a bylaw since the late 90s. So this is not a new set of rules or a new set of restrictions as some people have interpreted it. We're reviewing rules and things that have by and large been in place for quite a considerable period of time. So that's the process that we have to go through. And the Act is also quite clear on what must be in those policies and what considerations council must have regard to when we're writing or reviewing policies. So bearing in mind that the Dog Control Act is quite strongly focused on public safety and related issues, some of the things we have to talk about are minimising any danger or nuisance that may be created by council policies and activities in public places, avoiding any conflicts between different users of public places, so between dogs and children, for example, and being able to let people freely use public places as they want to. And we also have an obligation to assist dog owners in providing for the exercise and recreational needs of their dogs. So that's where the off-lead exercise areas and those sort of things fit into the policy. Is the policy working? In our view, yes, at a general level, we don't have any major challenges from a council point of view in terms of how the policy is working at the moment. And a lot of the feedback we are getting is around the public place stuff, and that's what we'll be focusing on. But on a day-to-day basis, we're not proposing or not seeing a need for any significant changes to the policy itself. Why has it been reviewed now? Well, the policy was last reviewed in 2015, so the current bylaw and policy both date back to 2015. And even when you're looking at the policy from the point of view of its format and the logo and the names of some places and some of those things, it is in places out of date and could benefit from a review simply on that basis alone. But a lot else has changed since 2015 as well, and those are some of the significant drivers that have led to council deciding to bring this review forward. So if we just pop to the next slide, Chloe. So these are probably of no surprise to most people when some of the things that have factored into this discussion. It's fairly self-explanatory. We know the district is growing, so we have more people in the district and we have more dogs. And the balance between the different groups within the district becomes more complex. So it's something we have to weigh up. We had around 7,500 dogs back in 2015. We're now over 9,000 registered dogs. So a 3 to 5% increase in dog numbers per year, essentially. So that in itself is quite significant. And along with that, obviously, we've had changes in land use. So we've had subdivisions and development. So where urban areas have extended out into other areas. And that then flows on to whether some of the existing reserves and things that were catering for a small area are still suitable to cater for larger areas that have built up around them. Some of those sort of discussions. Legal aspects, we always want to make sure our policies and bylaws are consistent with any changes in legislation that may have occurred or any case law that may have occurred during the time since they were last reviewed. So we'll be looking keenly at those. And they may not necessarily be changes to the dog control legislation itself, but sometimes other pieces of government actions such as the Search and Surveillance Act may affect how council operates in this space. So we can take the opportunity to make sure that that's all up to date as well. We get a lot of feedback from stakeholders, dog owners and other people around the policy and the bylaw, and as we've talked about, the public areas, and they're on a range of issues, and having to wait up to 10 years to consider some of these reviews is just not appropriate. So we're looking at the opportunity to shorten that time frame down. So this policy was due to be reviewed in 2025. The council has decided that's too long to wait for some of the matters that people have suggested. So that's where the decision has been made to bring this review forward. Yep, next slide, Chloe. So just a bit of a break away from some text. So just some of the things that are happening in the background that are not always obvious to everybody, but they are guided by the policy in particular. So we've got quite an emphasis on education within the animal control team. We've got comms and newsletters that go out to dog owners, registration packs that go to dogs when they're first registered or they transfer into the district. We've got, quite active in the rehoming space with some great relationships with other organisations that also have that aim to rehome as many dogs as we can. We've installed and provided agility equipment and other infrastructure over and above what many other councils have done in the past. We've got about 44 dog bins across the district in different places. And a very active, Facebook page where basically we're aiming to keep dog owners in particular as up to date as we can with things that we think are relevant to them. And it's probably quite likely that many of you have become aware of this process through that Facebook page. So just some of the things behind the scenes that are guided by the policy decisions that we'll be making over the next period of time.
Okay, so we're back to me. As we've said a number of times already, this is just the start of the review process, and we're seeking ideas and views, finding out what the community's issues and concerns are. We want to use this early feedback to shape the policy, to shape where dog exercise areas can and cannot be or could be. It could even help to shape how the animal control service works in the future. I can see a number of comments coming already regarding compliance and enforcement. So all that's extremely useful comment for us. The policy will tell us what then needs to be in the bylaw, which is the legal tool for enforcing the policy. So we'll analyze all of the feedback and work out what seems to be the best way of accommodating everyone's needs and wishes. But we already have some conflicting views. Some people that are for prohibition of dogs on some sites, some want dogs off leash, some want dogs on leash, all on the same site. So we've got those conflicting views. It's not easy always to accommodate everyone, and we're certainly aware that we cannot please everyone all of the time, but we'll do our best. We also need to make sure that we've got feedback from across the district. We've been hearing a lot from Cambridge so far, which is really good, and thank you for that. We also need to be sure that we're hearing from other communities, other stakeholders from Tangata Whenua, who also have some concerns about particular places. So as Wayne was saying, this will all take time. We're not going to rush it, otherwise we might miss something or get something wrong. So we're going to extend this engagement phase certainly through July and possibly even until the end of August. And during that time, we're going to be making sure that we are capturing the views from across the district. In early 2023, we aim to bring the proposals to councillors with a view to then having their agreements for formal public consultation with submissions, and we're expecting that to be somewhere around the February-March time. And if we can do that, we're hopeful that we can then have a public hearing of submissions in early April and ask the council to adopt both the policy and the bylaw at the end of April 2023. These timescales aren't set in stone. We might find that there's more work to do than we're currently anticipating. It might take a bit longer, so we need to be a little bit flexible, but we don't want this to go on and on and on. We want a degree of certainty in the earlier months of next year. Okay, I'll hand back to Carl.
Thanks, Graham. Sorry, I was just reading some of the chat there. So like I said earlier, we're at a high level, we're relatively happy with the policy itself from a council point of view, but there are some areas that we've noted in terms of the text of the policy itself that we can probably change to make a little more workable and more consistent with some other things that are happening. So we're not suggesting at this stage any wholesale changes to the policy itself. One weakness that we've identified is that it doesn't reference any emergency management type situations. So obviously council and another aspect of its role is an emergency management agency, and we need to ensure there's some consistency there. So an example might be if we have an emergency and people have to evacuate and take their pets with them, that our rules around where dogs can be, for example, are consistent with what we'd want to achieve under that framework. So just looking to include a reference to that. What constitutes dogs being under control is one of the core matters that the Dog Control Act itself deals with, and it's often also one of the issues of debate when enforcement action is taken or there's cases before the court. So we're always going to be looking to make sure that our interpretation of what is control is consistent and that it's clear for everybody, so everyone knows what their expectations are there. So for example, control doesn't just relate to the owner of the dog, but a person in charge of a dog, some of those sort of things. We've identified that there are some notices that can be issued under our policy or our bylaw that don't have appeal provisions attached to them in the same way as the Act does. So the Act gives us powers to issue notices to dog owners in certain situations, and the Act's really prescriptive about what an owner's right is in terms of appealing those notices and what process they need to go through. So we want to make sure that our bylaw is fair and reasonable and has those exact same provisions in it, which isn't clear at the moment. We're also allowed, and we don't do this very often, but disqualify dog owners from owning dogs in certain situations. And the Dog Control Act says that that can be for a period up to 5 years. And in the past, we've often defaulted to the 5 years as being the disqualification period in the few cases where that's occurred. So we're now looking at a better way of, again, being fair and reasonable and identifying that 5 years does not necessarily fit every situation. So giving ourselves a bit of scope and a bit of background to apply lesser periods if that's necessary. And the other thing which I've already touched on before is that currently, we're looking at a review of this policy and bylaw every 10 years. We don't believe that's a reasonable period of time, and we'd be looking to shorten that down. So again, feedback on how regularly that should be, and would be looking at incorporating that as well. So the next one being about the public places specifically. So again, just a bit of background. So public places can either be on leash, off leash, or prohibited. And if our policy doesn't prescribe a place as being on leash or prohibited, off leash or prohibited, then by default, a public place is going to be a dog on leash area. So most places in Waipa district are dog on leash areas. The main consideration for off-leash areas is that the areas must be suitable for that use. So when I say suitable, we're looking at suitable for the dogs and the owners, as well as anybody else who might be wanting to use that area. They're suitable in terms of if we have bins or other infrastructure there, are we able to service it? Are the areas big enough for the catchment that they're catering for? We want to go beyond just having pieces of grass and trying to look at what other options might be available. So for example, people have said to focus more on walks rather than areas, and some of those sort of considerations. Prohibited areas under the current policy and bylaw are generally sports grounds and other areas where dog access isn't necessarily compatible. And in fact, looking at our maps, which we'll flick across to shortly, most of our dog prohibited areas at the moment in the policy are schools and early childcare centres and other places where they have made requests to us to have their premises recorded as dog prohibited. There aren't a huge number under council control at present, and those that are generally sports grounds. And that again comes back to the health and safety aspect of playing sports and potentially encountering dogs and what dogs may leave behind. So we just go to the next slide. So this might be a little bit hard to read, and again, if you've not seen it, you can access it on our website, but basically just some straightforward maps of where these exercise areas or fleet exercise areas are and where the prohibited areas are. So effectively quite a lot of areas spread out across the district and the smaller areas there. And then when we move to the bigger towns, again, you can see the majority of prohibited areas are schools and sports grounds, and then in this case about a dozen off-lead exercise areas across the township of different sizes and shapes. And then Cambridge. So the benefit that Cambridge has is the town belt, and obviously there are some off-lead areas associated with that, and the same sort of picture there where prohibitions are generally schools and sports turfs. And the other thing to mention there is that both towns, Te Awamutu and Cambridge, have got reserves where we've installed dog agility equipment specifically for use with off-lead dog activities. So all of these are set by the policy. So again, looking for feedback on, where are the areas we could look at and those sort of things. So I think I'm now handing over to Brad, who's going to have lead the presentation through some of the considerations for his team.
Yeah, kia ora tātou. Thank you to Carl and Wayne for bringing us through that, and Graham. I'll just give you a quick overview of how the community services team links into this dog policy and bylaw review. In the community services team, we look after council's parks and reserves on behalf of the whole community. In making decisions for the community, we are required to take into consideration all the needs of our current users and also consider the needs of future users as well. When we are planning for the future of these spaces, there are a number of things that influence the decisions we make. For example, we've got the Reserves Act that tells us the purpose of each reserve and what this underlying use should be. We also receive regular feedback from members of the community and our stakeholders asking us to consider issues that they see that need to be managed. And we look at how our community is changing, for example, with large population growth in our main centres and an ageing population. These can all impact on the way people enjoy and use our spaces. To ensure open spaces are used well for everybody, we run processes to develop management plans, concept plans, and to provide guidance on what the community wants in the reserves and sets out direction to achieve this. For example, in 2021, we finalised concept plans with the community at both Lake Te Kutu in Cambridge and the War Memorial Park in Te Amutu. We received feedback from the community and our stakeholders that we potentially need to look at dog access within these reserves and whether they needed to be changes such as requiring on leash. And again, that's just some of the different uses of those parks with the intensification and population that comes with using those parks in central locations of town. Next slide, please, Chloe. So there's a few things to think about. Again, there's another one of Carl's little slides to break up some of our text that we've got for you tonight. When looking at the dog policy and bylaw review, we have to look across all of our existing parks and reserves to determine if we currently have the right level of dog access, but also we need to look at whether there is a need for new or additional dog exercise areas based on our growing and changing population. So going into this process, we've done a little bit of thinking about some of the key areas that we might need to look at, but we need the community's feedback, need your feedback before we can make any recommendations on how these might need to change. So we can flick on again, Chloe, please. So a few areas that we know need discussion, and a couple of them that have been mentioned already tonight. And again, we want to hear your feedback on some of these parks and reserves to know if changes are needed elsewhere as well. So Kakapuku has been mentioned before. Kakapuku is actually largely DOC owned and managed, and they're already dog prohibited. And so there's a little bit of inconsistency on that site already. Kiki Domain, that's another sports field platform where there's off leash at the moment. But noting that, what Carl said before about some of the health and safety concerns that come with using sports fields and having dogs at the same time, there is some conflict there. And we've touched on War Memorial Park at Te Amutu and Lake Te Kutu already through the concept plans that we did in 2021. Just noting that with the increase in usage of these sites, how do dogs fit into that picture? Importantly, we know that we're going to need new dog areas in the future, and while no decisions have been made, there are areas all around our district that could potentially be suitable for dog exercise areas. So we want to know what the community wants and needs are for these spaces as well. So if we go to the next one again, Chloe, please. So looking at new areas, we kind of want to know, what is missing from the dog walking network. What are attractive areas that people think could work well, and there's also growth cells all around our central urban areas, Cambridge, Te Amutu predominantly, where new parks coming on board, and how do we include those or include dog exercise areas as part of some of those new areas coming on board as well. Payne Park in Cambridge is currently on leash. We've had some feedback that this could be an off leash area by Cambridge Road, and Waipuku Park, which is on Maungatautari Road. We can explore off leash options there as well. We've just recently acquired new land next door to Waipuku, which will form up. Well, the intention is that we'll form up a cycleway through there, but there's large areas that we could potentially use that for dog off leash that could be close to water. And over on the Te Amutu side, Pikato Reserve, tucked in behind Pikato School, as an area as well that's largely undeveloped at the moment, but it's reasonably central and potentially has options to be a dedicated off leash area. And as been mentioned several times this evening, we've got the Cambridge Town Belt, which provides a wide range of options really for development still. And one area that we've considered in early stages is potentially making an off-lead area on the sort of the piece of land that goes across Thornton Road of the town belt, with McLean Street on the corner there. It's nice and close and central as well to town, which makes some good sense. So as we sort of noted, there's options that we've already started to think about, but we'd love to hear more about what the community wants in these spaces as well, both where and how they're used. So I think that's that slide done. Thanks, Chloe. I think I hand back to you here, Carl, do I?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. I think that is me. Yes, just an acknowledgement that there are some other related issues that potentially sit outside the policy, but again, we're open to feedback on all of these different sort of things. They all relate and back to the policy in one way or another. So we're getting quite a few requests for dog bins to be relocated or dog bins to be installed in different places across the district. So really, we're led by the policy in terms of what areas are most appropriate for those sort of extra bits and pieces to be installed in. I've seen a couple of comments in the chat around fencing of off-leads areas, so that's something we have to weigh up. There are pros and cons to fencing off areas of council reserves, and we'll look at each reserve individually as to whether they might be suitable for that or not, particularly the newer ones going forward. And we also, we'll use it to guide our approach to signage, and that relates to enforcement and some of the other questions that are coming through as well. That at the end of the day, there needs to be some responsibility by dog owners, but certainly we want to encourage compliance as easily as we can, and that is often through signage, education, information, etc. before we get to enforcement. And all of that links back to the decisions that we make at a policy stage as to what we want to achieve in the space. So again, open up to feedback on any of those related issues so we can consider them all together.
Okay, so this is back to me to round things off in terms of the presentation. So thank you for the feedback this evening. There are lots of comments coming in and it's fantastic. Thanks for everyone who has provided feedback through social media, emails, etc. so far outside of this webinar. All of this is really helpful for councillors and staff to see what the issues and concerns are. If we know them, we can see what we can do to address them as best we can. This will all guide how we develop our proposals for the dog control policy, include where dog areas should be and what sort of dog exercise areas they should be. We do want to make things better for the dogs and their owners, but we've also got to balance the interests of other site users. So the formal consultation we expect early-ish next year, probably February, March time, all being well. We have your contact details, obviously, because we've emailed you the link for this webinar. So if we can keep those, then we can tell you exactly when the formal consultation is going to happen, and we can send you all the relevant documents. So we'll endeavour to do that. If you don't want us to keep your details and send all these things to you, then can you please let us know? Otherwise, sometime early next year, you might get an email with some information inviting you to provide a submission to us. Okay, thank you, Chloe. And thank you everyone for staying with us throughout this presentation. We have a number of comments, not so much questions, but comments. What I'm going to do is to start going through these, and I'll throw them out to Carl and Brad for an initial response. Now, an initial response will literally be a gut reaction. It will not be a final answer by any means. We've obviously got to take everything into consideration, put it all into context with all the other feedback that we've got, but we've got a number of comments around compliance, enforcement, a lot of dogs being seen off leash walking public streets, dogs off leash when they should be on leash. So a lot of concerns around the enforcement. Carl.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Yeah, so a lot of those things sit under the Act itself, not necessarily the bylaw, but it's all part of the same picture, I guess. So we've got a team of 5 in the animal control space that are out actively, on a day-to-day basis, out dealing with dog control issues. And it's like everything, council can't have staff everywhere all of the time. So we do rely on complaints and feedback so we can target where some of those patrols are and those sort of things. But we're currently doing a review now on how that's working and are there better ways of doing it. And as I sort of mentioned before, enforcement isn't always our first knee-jerk reaction. We like to do education and try and resolve it through other means first. But at the end of the day, we are an enforcement authority, and we've got no issues doing that when we need to. One of the trends that we are seeing is that people aren't notifying us when there are issues. It's posted on social media, and we are often seeing the same dogs being posted on social media, roaming on a regular basis, but we never are formally made aware of that ourselves. So we miss the opportunity to have that education stage and to engage with those dog owners. So that's another trend that we've seen in recent times. And really the law sort of says, if you find, well, doesn't sort of say, it says, if you find the dog, your options are to either return it to its owner if you know them, or to notify council. And so again, it's we've got no issues with people that are well-meaning and want to look after the dog's welfare and get it home. That's fine. But yeah, we do miss that opportunity to engage with dog owners when dogs are regularly out and about. So a lot of those issues are related. Again, we'll target areas when they're brought to our attention, and we do enforcement. It's not something we shy away from when we need to.
Yeah, I can see we've got a number of actual locations named for us, and I'm sure your team will find that really helpful.
Yep, absolutely. We can have a look at those.
Yep. Okay, I can see one here. Someone's concerned about people running their dogs in the country on narrow roads while they're still driving in their car. So that sounds like people making the dog run alongside the car. So is that something for the policy, Carl?
Yes, I think that probably fits into the discussion around what constitutes a dog being under control. And we've certainly had things of that nature being brought to our attention, cars and bicycles and other bits and pieces. So that's definitely something we'll factor in. Council doesn't generally have control over vehicles being driven on a road. So there are complications there, but we're definitely looking at ways to discourage that. And it's not just on narrow rural roads. We have seen it in townships and around exercise areas and other places as well. So yep, definitely on our radar.
Okay. One of our people in the webinar here runs dogs off lead at McLean Street, which is great. Would love something similar in Kiki, Te Awamutu. Maybe there is somewhere fenced that we could use for dog exercise. They've not found it yet. What are the possibilities? Carl, Brad?
Not sure there's any fully fenced areas. Don't think there's any fully fenced areas just yet. Ash Grove Reserve off Chatsfield Drive is largely fenced, and it's where the dog agility equipment is in Te Awamutu. So that's quite a large open area that, yeah, like I say, is almost fully fenced. So that might be a suitable option in the meantime, but we'll factor in the fencing question as we look at these suggestions.
Okay. Another issue not quite related to the exercise areas, and that's people not keeping dogs on their property, and some streets in Te Awamutu being mentioned there. So dogs on property is another issue we need to consider.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, wandering dogs is one of the highest complaint areas that council receives calls about. So that's the first thing we need to know when that's happening, and if possible, you know, what dog and where from, so we can start that process. You know, we'll follow through. If the warnings and education don't work, then we start getting into infringement notices and impoundings and those sort of things. But we need to be aware of the individual occasions and do what we can there.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes. We'll try and get through as many of these as we possibly can. Would like council to consider making all off-leash dog areas completely fenced. Farm style wire fencing, that's an issue there. Conflicting signage in McKinnon Park, that's confusing to where the dog can be on or off lead. One end seems to say off lead and the other on lead, and also there's agility grounds which are off lead. So consistent signage, please, is the question there.
Absolutely. Hopefully that's an easy fix. There are certainly some reserves where there are mixed, so there's might be off lead and on lead within the same area potentially, but no, that's an easy one to review. We can do that before the policy.
Okay. A question for you here. If a dog has been deemed a nuisance or dangerous, can this be reviewed if the person or dog has subsequently gone through a behavioural modification program successfully?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. My understanding of, so dogs can be classified as dangerous or menacing, other two higher level ones. I believe that those would be permanent. Helen, you can jump in if I'm heading off down the wrong track there. But again, those are generally things that will sit under the Act probably rather than the policy. Need to have a look at that in a bit more detail.
Okay, that might be one that we'll need to research and put up on the website. But thank you for that. That sounds like a really good question because you've got him stumped. So another comment here. Thanks for holding this, and thank you for coming along and joining us this evening. I mentioned earlier conflicting views in the feedback that we've got. So as an idea here for addressing this by time zoning dog on and off leash areas, for example, a couple of hours in the morning or afternoon to let the dog walkers have their dogs off leash. This sounds like Lake Tekuutu by the looks of things, or it could be Lake Naruto. But time zoning would give the dogs an opportunity to be off leash. The current flat, boring dog parks that don't have their agility areas maintained sufficiently are not much fun for either the dog or owner to walk around. There you go, Carl. Time zoning.
It certainly works in other places, you know, predominantly coastal places with beaches and similar. So yeah, can't see why we cannot give some consideration to that and how it might work.
Right. I think we might spin onto the maps when this comment came in. There are not a lot of areas and few are large.
No, that's good feedback. I mean, that's obviously what we're after. They may have been suitable at the time they were created. Maybe not so now. So no, fair comment.
Okay. McKinnon Park needs to be safely fenced and gated if it's to be an off-leash exercise area. Costs are not huge for this, especially if council asks the community to be involved. I suspect that's with helping to put the fencing in rather than paying for it separately to the other sources of revenue for council.
You would definitely look at that. I'm not sure we'll get to the point of all off-lead areas being fenced because some of them do have, they are used by other parties and stuff, and we do have, we'll come back to that definition of control as well. If there are concerns with the dog's behaviour, a fence is probably not the solution. But yeah, we see some merit in certainly having some areas fenced. So Wordsworth Street being the prime example.
Okay, some larger dogs need larger areas where they can be fully exercised. There is already very, very limited areas where dogs can be taken for a decent walk, even on leash. More options for decent walks would be wonderful.
Yeah, so I think walks is probably the key there. So, you know, maybe if we can look at moving away from just specified parks, for example, and try and get some better linked areas, something along those lines.
So someone in Cambridge encountering so many dog walkers in on-leash areas, sports ground, main streets with the dogs off the leads, and council not doing anything about it. Dog owners being abusive if they're asked to put the dog on a lead. Okay, similar to comments that we've seen already. Question: can we open up the now closed Leamington motocross bike track as it is a reserve and no longer used off lead? Is that a Brad?
Yeah, happy to take that one. Yeah. Hey, look, well, currently it still is leased by the Cambridge Motocross. They are looking to exit that site, and there are a range of options for that site that could be explored, and dog walking is certainly one of those. So, yeah, keen to hear that feedback if it is part of that consideration. And it is nice and close to the gully system there, so just be balancing that biodiversity aspect up with the dogs off lead. But yeah, 100%. Let's have a look at it if it's got general support for it.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Sports grounds are poorly managed. Sportsmen regularly asking people to get their dogs off the field and put them on leads. Okay, is that a sports field management issue or a dog owner management issue? I wonder.
I think if I interpret that one rightly, that's more that there are dogs going onto sports fields when they potentially shouldn't be. So
yeah,
causing conflicts either with people playing sport or leaving dog mess behind, and then that's equally a health and safety issue as well when someone goes for an unpleasant slide.
Okay, thank you. We got 5 minutes left. Let's see what we can get in. What other bush walks can we use if Kakapuku is taken away? I don't understand the cultural aspects when Naruto is also a PAR site. Now, we had hoped that we'd have someone here this evening from Tangata Whenua. We've not got anyone, unfortunately, so we'll probably need to park that one and try and get an answer up online by the end of the week, unless anyone else from the team wishes to make a comment.
I think, as you noted before, Graham, that we're going to be engaging with a wide range of stakeholders and partners, and Mana Whenua are one of those. So we'll be getting some thoughts from them on different areas around the district. Yeah,
but in terms of helping people understand what the cultural issues are, that's really a question for Tangata Whenua to help us with, I think. So we'll have to park that one, I'm afraid, and get the answer up online as soon as we can.
In terms of the bush aspect there too, with a lot of the bush areas are not under our control, so that's one thing we need to consider. But my understanding is the Department of Conservation are also considering reviewing their dog restrictions, so we'll be keeping in contact with them as well to see what may change in that space.
Okay, one coming your way, Brad. We've listed Te Awamutu's War Memorial Park as off leash. This is not accurate. Thank you.
You were that one, Carlo? I thought it was off leash.
Yes, not saying that the whole park is, but certainly the back piece that runs around behind Memorial Park, around behind the netball courts, and then across to Montefori Reserve on the corner of Factory Road there is off leash. So certainly not the whole of Te Awamutu War Memorial Park, but certainly a portion of it is currently off lead.
Okay, comment here around our communication error, for which we still apologise. Feeling that without the social media backlash, we'd have been trying to push through some of these changes rather differently. And that we could have used the annual registration letters to communicate to dog owners. Carl?
It's a matter of timing as much as anything. There was reference to the dog policy and bylaw review coming up in the newsletter that went to all registered dog owners, as far as I'm aware, but the need to get those registration documents out to dog owners to comply with the requirements of that process wasn't in step really with this process. So we've given as much of a heads up as we could, but as we've been quite clear to say, we haven't made any decisions, and this is just pre-consultation. There's still a full formal process to go. So it's far too early to say that we'd already made any proposals at that stage, because that's certainly not the case.
Okay, thanks, Carl. I'm just looking down what's in the comments box here. We've got lots more. We're not going to get through it in the time we've got, but just some very quick questions with quick answers. Can we advise via the Antenno app of dogs not being on leads when they should be?
Yes, and you should also be able to attach photos and any other notes that might be helpful, because ultimately, at the end of the day, if we're going to take enforcement action, we need to prove an offence. So identifying the dog is the starting point, and working from there. So more information, the better, but that is certainly an option.
Okay. When does enforcement kick in? This has been going on for years and years. This is probably about a whole range of issues. I suspect it's off-leash dogs in on-leash areas that's the question has got in mind.
There's enforcement happening all the time. So again, we need to be aware of the specifics, so we can target the owners that are letting everyone else down.
Okay, there's one for you and the animal control team. What about shift-styled hours for the dog control officers so they are out in the evenings and weekends?
If our animal control officers aren't working, we have contracted animal control officers working. So we're logging jobs and responding to jobs 24 hours a day. We do prioritise what is urgent and what we do respond to after hours, but we do have staff or officers working 24 hours a day.
Okay, this next one I think is for me. Are council reviewing any other policies and bylaws other than exercise areas? Not as far as dogs are concerned. We've just finished consultation on a water supply bylaw, and that's the only other bylaw work underway at the moment. Next year, or in the next 12 months, we should be looking at our public places bylaw and our solid waste management and minimisation bylaw. So there's other bylaw stuff going to be happening in the next 12 months. You heard it here first. What else have we got? What are the main things that are likely to be reviewed? So there you go. Public places, so that's street trading, signage in public places, street dining, we've got parking, all kinds of things like that in the public places bylaw. So the culturally inappropriate areas, I'm afraid this goes back to my comments around the round Tanga to Fenwa, and we'll need to come back to you as soon as we can on that. Would you consider a rebate for dog registration for dogs who attend daycares or something similar, as they are in a safe area that keeps them out of trouble?
We'll put it on our things to consider list. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is the logistics and us demonstrating that. But fees and charges is a related process. So no, keep it on the list. We'll have a look. The way our fees and charges are calculated, we're always looking at ways that we can do that. That's fair, reasonable, and equitable across all different dog owners. So there might be something we can look at in that space.
Okay, what are your thoughts on designating some dog off-lead areas for large dogs and other smaller off-lead areas for small dogs?
Well, the first complication would be where you draw the line between big and small, I suppose. But I understand that the basic premise behind that. So yeah, there might be some options we can factor in.
Okay, the question I can answer here. Will the submissions that were requested by email still be used? would be good for these to be included with the material. So yes, we will certainly consider everything that we've received so far, whether it's called feedback or submission or whatever. We will certainly be using that. Please, can we start having dog control registration notices, etc., sent by email?
I believe we're working on that.
Okay, can you clarify which park of Tekautu Lake is on leash and, sorry, the comments just jumped, and where is off leash, please?
Yep. Basically all the lower area is off leash and the upper area is on leash, apart from the playground area, which is prohibited to dogs.
Okay. And the last one, and this is going to be the last one, sorry if I haven't got to your comments, but we'll save them, as I said, and we'll still go through them and consider them. Can you tell me if the off-lead exercise area off Shelley Street in Leamington is fully fenced? It backs onto many houses in Cambridge Park, and there's a gully that extends past the stormwater catchment all the way to the main road, I think. So it's obviously security for the dogs there. Is it fully fenced?
Yeah, Wilco, I don't think it is fully fenced.
Okay.
I wouldn't be able to comment 100% on that unless Carl or Helen's got further information.
No,
Okay.
it isn't fully fenced.
All right. Okay, I can see that the comments are still coming in. Look, if you've still got comments, feel free to keep sending them through. We are still using the submissions email, submissions@wiperdc.govt.nz. We will let you know if we set up a different email address for this feedback phase. I'm going to draw a line there. We've gone slightly longer than expected. That's because we've had so many great comments. It's been a pleasure to bring this webinar to you and to read all your comments. You've given us plenty to do, plenty to think about, and yeah, I'm glad we've given ourselves more time to go through it all. We will endeavour to put this recording onto the council website as soon as possible so other people can access it as well, and we'll try and answer the questions and respond to the comments as soon as we can as well, hopefully by the end of Thursday this week. But there were rather a lot there, so we'll do our best. So thank you very much, team, for helping put this together. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. If you haven't had dinner yet, enjoy it when you get to it. I will endeavour to do the same. Have a good evening, stay warm, stay safe, and give your dogs lots of cuddles, which is what I'm going to do because mine's probably waiting outside the door to give me a big greeting. So thank you very much and good evening.